Shadow Minister Andrew Bowie.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I start by paying tribute and agreeing with the words of fellow Aberdonian and the Right Honourable Member for East Oxford, and paying tribute to all of those energy workers who, over decades, have worked in incredibly dangerous conditions, and some of whom have given their lives to ensure that the lights stayed on and industry continued to function in this country, many of them from my constituency of West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine, and indeed to pay tribute to the outstanding contribution for the member for Stoke-on-Trent, who brought to the House's attention the dependence of so many industries in this country to gas and the deindustrialisation that we are seeing across so many aspects of our industry right now. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, there we go, and now we know. With war raging in the Middle East and in Europe, Labour is a party being held captive by extremists who refuse to act in our national interest, are content to see jobs lost in their thousands, and won't take advantage of our greatest asset lying untapped and unexplored under our own waters. I'd be delighted to give way.
Thank him for giving way. He talks of a national interest. Does he agree that it was disgraceful that Gazprom was allowed to acquire an interest in the North Sea in the years after 2011 without a word of protest from his party when they're in government?
We welcomed investment from around the world, but obviously we divested ourselves of any Russian investment in the North Sea as soon as we could after Putin's actions in Ukraine, as I'm sure he would have expected us to as a responsible government. But on days like this, unlike acting in the national interest as we did as a government, you do have to wonder on whose side the party opposite are on, because it isn't on Britain's side and it isn't on the side of the British people. Now, we have witnessed for 4 years now how Putin's armies have weaponised energy to not only starve the people of Ukraine, but to weaken our continent. The Secretary of State, if he was here, would tell us that this proves why he wants to double down on his plans to ditch oil and gas. Except under even his ridiculously ambitious and unrealistic plans, Great Britain would still need gas for around 50% of its energy demand. NESO have highlighted that gas will be the UK's energy of last resort for the next 10 to 20 years, and that we will require a diverse and resilient supply. But they, Labour MPs, the enablers of this absurdity, would rather see us reliant on others for this gas, on Qatar or Norway, rather than our own British industry at a higher cost and with higher emissions, 15 times the emissions of our own supply, and we'd be more exposed to price spikes. Let us be absolutely clear. 100% of all British North Sea gas goes directly into the British gas grid. You do wonder if members opposite understand it, so let me explain. By choosing to use less from British waters, the more we have to import, the more insecure as a country we become. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, the human tragedy at the centre of this blatant disregard for our national interest is playing out on rigs, in offices and in homes across the north east of Scotland right now. Because, Mr Speaker, the Labour Party, enabled by the Liberal Democrats, and whilst we are talking about the Liberal Democrats, we heard from their spokeswoman today that they do not support any new oil and gas licences. I do think she might want to explain that to their candidate in Shetland in the upcoming Scottish parliamentary election, who warned of the impact if the Clare oil field was not expanded, or their candidates in the north east of Scotland who said, we are going to need oil and gas for the foreseeable future, and it is better to support production here than to rely on imports of LNG from abroad, which are more polluting. So which is it? What is the Liberal Democrat plan? Why is the Liberal Democrats always say one thing in this place and another thing everywhere else? Once again, you cannot trust a word the Liberal Democrats say, but they are enabling the Labour Party, and they are choosing, Madam Deputy Speaker, to see 1,000 jobs lost in our North Sea every single month, of course.
For giving way. I'm a fan of his work. But I do have to ask this question. The Conservatives and Reform would have joined the American-led war of choice without any sort of questioning of the reasons. The Conservatives and Reform want to leave the UK reliant on fossil fuels and overly exposed to energy price shocks. Can he please tell me what is the difference between the Conservatives and Reform?
Yeah.
Corroborate? I am equally a fan of the honourable member's work, but I would like to make very clear it's not that we would have joined the war ongoing in the Middle East. It's that we wouldn't have left British bases and British assets undefended in the way that this government did, in the way that this government shamefully did, by removing assets from the region when we knew very well what was coming round the corner. But 1,000 jobs are being lost every single month, Madam Deputy Speaker, high-skilled, high-paid jobs. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is personal. I have the immense privilege of living in and representing the north east of Scotland. These jobs aren't figures on a spreadsheet, as they are to Labour MPs opposite. They are my constituents, my neighbours, my friends and my family, and the callousness and the disregard that the Labour Party are treating these people, that region with, at the minute, will not be forgotten. The Labour Party refused to acknowledge it, but it is real, it is happening, and it is happening at frightening speed. These people are, right now, having to make a terrible choice to hang around in the north east of Scotland, awaiting the long-promised and yet never delivered renewable jobs boom, which always seems to be just around the corner and which pays far less, or leave their homes, their communities, their families and move overseas. Many, indeed most, are choosing that. I won't because of time, I'm afraid. They are leaving the country altogether. They are taking their families and, crucially, their skills out of the United Kingdom to countries that have governments awake to the reality, that actually support their domestic oil and gas industries, to Houston, to Riyadh, to Calgary or Stavanger. In Stavanger, where they are drilling right now in the very same sea that we could be, only to sell it back to us. It is utterly perverse. Workers in Aberdeen are going to any country with an oil and gas industry in which the eco-extremism that the Secretary of State is so enthralled by is not found in government, which, by the way, is every other country in the world where there is a domestic oil and gas industry. It used to be said that in every country in the world where there is oil and gas, you would find an Aberdonian accent. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, it turns out that soon the only place you won't find an Aberdonian oil worker is, in fact, Aberdeen. There has been a steady beat of job losses ever since Labour entered government. Every single month. BP, Hunting, Harbour Energy, Chevron, Wellsafe, Petrofac, Ithaca. The party opposite talks about what we did in government. During the 2014-15 energy price shock, when jobs were sadly lost in the north east of Scotland, what did we do? We commissioned Ian Wood to produce a review into the future of the North Sea. We implemented a policy of maximum economic recovery from the North Sea. We reduced taxes on our domestic oil and gas industry, and we stabilised the workforce for the last 6 years. We made the North Sea the most investable basin in the world during our time in government. What are the Labour government doing? They are doing the exact opposite. They are seeing job losses, Madam Deputy Speaker. They are seeing investment turn away, and they're surrendering this country to the whims of dictators overseas. I could go on when it comes to the job losses. When they aren't cutting their jobs, companies are consolidating their operations. All of these companies have had operations in this country for many, many years. So I welcome the recent intervention from the member for Mid and South Pembrokeshire in calling for an end to this government's war on the North Sea. We can add his name, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the ever-growing list of people and organisations calling for this government to change course. The GMB, Unite, Tony Blair, Octopus's Greg Jackson, Great British Energy Zone, and Ed Miliband and Secretary of State's appointed Jürgen Meyer, Renewable UK. Why are all these people wrong, but only, and I mean only, the Secretary of State is right? I won't because of time. Notably, I will not because of time. Notably, however, this list doesn't include one Scottish Labour MP. Indeed, some Scottish Labour MPs are actively campaigning to stop any production at all, with 2 of their number signing a letter asking the Secretary of State to block the Rosebank oil field. Now, why don't we just for a moment entertain the idea that Clean Power 2030 isn't utterly ridiculous and utterly undeliverable? Who does the Minister think will deliver this? The people with the skills that are needed for floating offshore wind are leaving in their thousands. The assets to deploy these new technologies are moving overseas. Who does the Minister think is going to invest in this transition? The Port of Aberdeen has only recently invested in a new harbour to accommodate the long-promised boom in floating offshore wind. But there are no new turbines going out to sea today. The quayside has no blades waiting, and the port is laying off staff, because 60% of that port's revenue still comes from oil and gas, with only 1% from renewables. We could change course. I do hope members opposite that represent Scottish constituents paid close attention, and I hope they thought about whose side they are on, because Labour MPs have an opportunity today. Join us in the voting lobby and demonstrate clearly whose side they are on. Are they on the side of British workers, our industry, our security, our economic success, or on the side of an increasingly isolated Secretary of State? The government could take a decision today. Vote to end the ban on new licences and unlock 2.9 billion of barrels of opportunity that lie below the sea. Vote to scrap the Energy Profits Levy. Vote to approve Rosebank and Jackdaw fields immediately. But it's very clear they won't. Because it's absolutely clear that, as ever, there is only one party that has a plan to get Britain drilling again, to make Britain secure, to cut bills, to deliver a stronger economy and a stronger country. That is, and always will be, the Conservative and Unionist Party.